Hello, my name is Niklas Andersson and I've been privileged to talk to you about the nature of creativity. And since I'm a strong believer of learning by doing, you'll explore this topic with me through three creativity exercises. And yes, you can call them tests, a word that I don't really like. And these are mixed with some snippets of theory, mainly connected to recent developments in neuroscience. I'm very happy once again to have this opportunity, and hopefully you'll find this topic as interesting and intriguing as I do. For the three exercises, you need 5 sheets of A4 paper in total and a pencil. So pause the video now and get your 5 papers and a pencil. Are you done? Okay, let's get started. I've been working in this place, Umeå Institute of Design, during my whole academic career. The story started back in 1992 when I was then working in the creative industry as a graphic designer and art director, was invited to give a 1-hour lecture on the introduction to presentation techniques. Well, and the rest is history, as the saying goes. The subject of design as an academic subject fascinated me, and so in 1994 I applied to UID. I quit my job and became a student, and I graduated in 1999 with a Master's degree in Fine Arts. After graduation I worked with an applied research project for a couple of years, and in 2001 I was hired as a lecturer in design. And since then I never stopped teaching, lecturing, workshopping, tutoring and researching with both students and researchers, trying to grasp what creativity is all about. By the way, I've also been director of studies and part of the department's leadership team on and off since 2008. At UID, we are constantly using creativity as a core tool, and we are looking for signs of this in our applicants to our programs, in the students' thesis projects, and so on and so on. But for us designers, it's so ubiquitous that we aren't aware of it anymore, and it's like water for a fish. That's why I really liked giving these kind of talks, because it forces me to think and reflect over this phenomena of creativity. So what I usually do in the beginning is that I try to define some core definitions. So in OAD, we see that creativity is defined as the faculty of being creative, or the ability or power to create. That's powerful stuff, right? And I would argue that the ability to power to create is maybe one of the characteristics that makes us human. That's a force of nature that all of us are born with, whether we like it or not. But more about that later. So let's start with exercise number 1, kicking off with the creative challenge. Something called the Doodle Challenge. And the preparations for this is that, of course, you get a pencil and you get one of the sheets of A4 format. And I want you to fill the paper with 30 circles. And this is, for example, 5 columns with 6 rows, for example. So again, pause the video while you're drawing the circles. Okay, more preparations. So now I want you to turn as many of these circles as possible into recognizable objects. So I want you to make simple doodles, no perfect drawings, like these examples, for example. And you will have 3 minutes. I will start the clock and also some background music. So, are you ready? Let's go. Okay, so time's up. So take away your pen and take a look at your sheet. So what do you see there? So I'm going to ask you a few questions and then you can reflect over them in your own pace. So first of all, how many circles did you fill in? Did you fill in all of them? Or maybe half of them? Or just one row? Of course, it's in creativity theory literature. It's often said that it's good to fill as many circles as you can, or the more a person who filled in more circles are said to be more creative than people who made just a few circles. But then you have other aspects of it. For example, if the ideas are similar or distinctly different from each other. I mean, of course, they can be rather similar. For example, here is you can make the bottom row there is similar ideas like faces. You can fill the whole sheet with just faces. That's not as creative as making very distinctly the different ones. So like the top row there with the letter Ö, you have the tree trunk and maybe a yin-yang sign and so on. So all are very different. So it depends on not just on the quantity, but also actually the quality of, or the difference between those content is also as important as the amount. Another question I have for you is, did you break the rules and combine two or more circles in the same idea? If you've done that, that's also a sign of that you have ability to thinking outside the box. So here, for example, is one example that you have making two circles into bicycle, for example, or a pair of spectacles and so on. Another question to reflect over is where did this rule come from? Did you have to one object per circle? Because if you stop the video now and rewind back and listen to what I said about the rules, I think you see that I didn't say that you should only have one object per circle. And these are often the mental blockings that we give ourselves when we try to solve problems, or that we often limit our creativity in different ways. So this was a doodle challenge. Hope you enjoyed it. So now a little snippet of theory, because creativity is very much about novelty, finding out new things, and also handling new things and so on. And in literature we have this, I will actually point at these three authors or researchers that have written rather substantially about creativity and actually also about novelty. Olaf Sporns, Csikszentmihalyi, and Elkonon Goldberg. And they all have different they are covering different aspects. And one way of defining these aspects is going from more like a biological way of structuring where creativity occurs. So we have for example, Olaf Sporns. He's a neuroscientist working mainly on molecular and cellular level. Then we have Elkonon Goldberg, who also is a neuroscientist, but also a neurosurgeon, and he's looking more into the the brain and the neuroscience into more more organism perspective. And then you have Csikszentmihalyi, who is a psychologist, psychology researcher, and he's more into the more population and community culture way of creativity. So let's start with Olaf Sporns. So Olaf Sporns, he was part of, or is still part of, this company called the Human Connectome project. And they are working with try to make a map of how the human brain neural networks are interconnected, because the brain is a dynamic network of 128 billion neurons with their synapses. They are arranged in clusters and connected by hubs and into a complex network. By the way, this human Connectome project is still ongoing. They haven't finished. They thought they were finished by 2015, but they're still kind of not finished because it's turned out to be much more tougher task than they thought, actually. What he talks about is actually different kinds of networks and how they're interconnected to each other. And in his book, he talks about specifically three different networks that he thinks are mostly important also when it comes to creativity, and how they are interacting. Actually, he talks about the Sahlin network is maybe the most important one, but they all kind of working together in dynamic ways. So the default mode network is when we are at rest mostly. The central executive network is active when we are performing tasks, and then we have the kind of the novelty, the Sahlin network that are mainly working with kind of handling novelty in different ways. And these are also called kind of dynamic network connectivity between these networks. And these networks are using something called the small world architecture. I will also in the comment section of this video, I will also have more links to, you can read up more of the details of these things, because I'm not a neuroscientist myself, but I think it's still super interesting stuff that he talks about there. Second author is Goldberg. I talked about previously. He is a neurosurgeon, and he is then looking at the brain more as an organ and talking about the different cortexes and the hemispheres. And he sees that the kind of the prefrontal cortex and the right hemisphere seems to be of importance here when it comes to creativity. The prefrontal cortex is about the executive functions, and then right hemisphere is mainly connected to the cognitive and novelty functions. However, he also talks that actually this kind of way of looking at the brain as kind of more like a separate areas with certain specialized functionality is actually proven to be wrong. So it talks more about that today. Now it's more like large scale networks in brain that are actually interconnected. So the prefrontal cortex is interacting with other parts of the brain, as well. Also the right hemisphere is also very much interacting also with the left hemisphere. So it's not that distinct kind of this division anymore as it used to be in earlier years literature in this area. And they're all large scale networks of all of importance on creativity. Then we come to the final author, Csikszentmihalyi, who one of the founders of the positive psychology research field. And he wrote this book about kind of psychology of discovery and invention in 2013. And one of his very interesting aspects that he talks about, and he actually had been talking about even from the beginning when he talks about positive psychology, is this kind of the funnel of and the balance between challenge and skills, and he's been using this diagram. I think all of you have seen it more or less a few times. And I think within the certain kind of, in the middle part there, you have the flow area. Those of us, when you're really absorbed in something, then you're in flow. Because then you have the right amount of challenge, the right amount of skills. And you just you're in the zone, and you don't you're not distracted by things outside. You're just focusing on your thing. That's flow. If you have too low skills but high challenge, it becomes anxiety. If you're kind of have a lot of high skills but not so much challenge, then you become bored and have boredom. But if the right amount of quota between challenge and level and skills levels, then you have in flow. And this is how it can look like for someone who is doing this journey. And you often he says you do it stepwise. So you increasing you're getting more and more skilled, and by then you need more challenge to improve your skills, and then you can and you go up for this kind of step matter, zigzag matter. And this occurs not only on an individual level, but also in more kind of community or teams level as well. So, and now let's end this first part of theory by doing exercise number 2. So let's solve a problem. It's called the dots problem. And preparations again is you bring out your pen and another sheet of paper. And now I want you to draw a matrix of 9 large dots. And here I want you to do columns of 3 with 3 dots in each, like this. So I pause the video while you're drawing the dots. Okay, now you're done. So now I want you to connect all these dots by drawing a maximum of 4 straight and connected lines. You have 3 minutes. Are you ready? Let's go. Time's up. Okay, so what have you drawn now? I just want to show you like the standard solution to this. And it looks like this. So this is called the standard solution. Can you, and maybe you've done that, or you didn't do it. Maybe even you tried to do it maybe in fewer than 4 lines, because 4 lines was the maximum. You do it in 3 lines, which you could have done like this, for example, if I have a pencil with a more broader stroke. In theory, you could have done also like this if you had the time to do it. Or maybe just take the paper around and do it like this. If you have a really broad pen, of course, you can do it like this. Or you can try and make it into a big kind of crumble all together like a ball, and then stab it with a pen. And in theory, at least once, you should be able to punch all of them together with maybe just 1 stroke. So yeah, some of these examples are more silly and some are more practical. But what this kind of exercise illustrates is kind of that there's kind of this kind of a correct solution, and maybe also then maybe some more innovative solutions. And the correct solution is something that if you've done this exercise before, or maybe you read it in some kind of more mental training books, for example, or done this before in other exercises, similar exercises, you reproduce the right answer, and you don't think outside the box again. Also, if you haven't done this before, maybe you limited yourself into the basics of 3x3 and didn't think outside those 3x3 boxes, so to say. So another kind of label to this kind of reproducing correct solution and innovative solutions is talking about linear thinking and lateral thinking. And lateral thinking is thinking more about novelty. So linear thinking is it is one way of doing it the right way or no way. And here's one example or illustration of that kind of mental thinking. How you doing a process, then you come upon a kind of an obstacle or a problem, and no way of how you can go through it. But in lateral thinking, that was coined, a term that was coined by others, but for example by Bono. The idea is that more than you're thinking, can you bypass the problem in other ways and come around that, and maybe also come up with multiple different solutions, not just one, the solution. Okay, now we're going to jump directly into exercise number 3. So we're going to finish this exercise now with a creativity test, and this is called a test, even though it can also be a creativity exercise, I would say. But yeah, it's a test. And the preparations again is that you have your pen, but this time I want you to have 3 empty sheets of paper in A4 format. So I want to pause the video while you're getting the papers. Okay, we're back again. And soon you will see 3 common objects. And each object has a common use that will be described in the text beside each object. And your task is to come up with 6 alternative uses for each of these 3 objects. And 1 sheet of paper per object. And here's an example that will not be used later of course, but in an example how it can look like. So example could be, for example, a shoe. And the common use is then used as a footwear. And then you come up with different kind of usages. So a chewing toy for dogs, a door stopper, it's a sailing boat in a bathtub, to drink champagne from, to hide money in, or maybe as a hammer. Okay? And please notice now that all of these uses listed are different from each other and different from the common use of the shoe. Okay, because none of these is actually using the shoe as a footwear. And 6 correct uses then you give. So you have to also give your score yourself and give you kind of points. And 6 correct uses is equal to 6 points in this test, self-test. Here are some incorrect answers that will not give any credits. For example, if it's too similar to each other to the common use, it's disqualified and will not be scored. So, for example, like the chewing toy for cats it's so similar to chewing toy for dogs that will be disqualified, and also to dance in is to be using as a footwear, so it will not also be disqualified. So here are 4 correct uses, so the score will be then 4 points. So I want you to do your own scoring after you've done this test. Okay, more preparations. So, and a tip is not to spend too much time on any one object. Instead, write down those that occur to you and return later if time permits. And you will have 4 minutes in total. Are you ready? And by the way, this time it's no music because this requires more silent thinking, so to say. So this time, no music, just the timer. Okay, let's go. So time's up. And pause the video while you're summing up your score. Okay, so now you're summing up, and so what's your score? If you have between 1 and 6 points in total, then you're, I would say, average with the kind of general population. If you have between 7 and 12, you have a really good score compared to the general population. And if you have between 13 and 18, then you're imaginative. And if you have even more than 18, then you're kind of really great. Because you could of course also write up more than 6 for each, maybe 7, 8, and 9 different usages for each element or each product. The test you've done is actually a test from NASA back in 1967 by Guilford and Land. It's called Alternate Uses Test. It was an official test used by NASA to discover creative talent within engineering teams within the Apollo program, but also other space exploration programs within NASA. And they made a study also with 1,600 children and 1 million adults in the US between 1967 and 1977. And we're going to look at how many achieve the imaginative level. I mean, the level with high scores in this test. In the age between 4 and 5 years, up to 98% of the children achieve the imaginative level. If you then go to look at the 10-year-olds, then the number dropped to 30%. And then they did a study again on children who were 15 years of age, and it dropped down to 12%. And these were the same children that did the test in different intervals. There was a longitudinal study of the same kids doing the test, of course with different objects for each test, but still the same kind of test. They stopped the study after 10 years because some of the teachers became really depressed because they saw that their school children did become less and less imaginative, so they stopped the test. However, they also did this follow-up study on 1 million adults in the US. And what do you think will be the number of adults that achieved the imaginative level? Well, the answer in this study is then 2%. You see, the completely opposite for the 4 and 5 years old children. What is the mechanism behind this this development? Land have some theories, and I think his theory is that it has to do with school and the school education system, and also how when we grow up and become more adults also. He said, and it connects back to the lateral and linear thinking. And he has this analogy. He talks about that in a car, especially in a car with the automatic gearbox, you have accelerator and a brake. So the accelerator is a divergent thinking activity in our mind, in our brain. So in the accelerator mode, you whoa, that's a cool idea. Yes, let's do that. Yeah, cool. And then you have maybe then the brake pedal is more than convergent thinking. Then you want to no, wait a minute. Will this actually work? No, this might be wrong. This might be also embarrassing. I don't want to embarrass myself or other people, so this is stupid, and so on, so on. And it's yes, I mean, both kinds of thinking are important, but we have to separate them. And he said that in at least the American school system, and I think it's kind of also relevant in many other school systems also here in other parts of the world, we kind of apply divergent and convergent thinking in the same time. So we accelerate and brake at the same time, and that kind of interrupts the ability to be imaginative. It would be nice to do also a follow-up study now in the 2020s to see if it is the same numbers. It might be the same, it might be different. Okay, so back to this overview again. So in our what we've done now, we're looking more into we stopped at the organism level more or less because we looked at kind of people, kids, students, researchers, and so on, and NASA engineers and so on. But how about again kind of the populations or communities or ecosystems? Then creativity tends to be more like a social phenomenon. And it has to do with the organization you're in, the ecosystem you're in. Then kind of the creativity can be fueled, or it could be hampered, or it could be kind of held back for different reasons. And another thing also when it comes to about creativity is that it becomes this kind of a process from rather kind of noisy uncertainty. And then you become more looking for patterns, and you have insights, and then you have clarity and focus. And this is a kind of a process that takes time. And to be able to kind of obtain this kind of from noise and uncertainty to kind of clarity and focus, you need something that I would like to end this video presentation with, and that is something called the creative climate. And Nils-Erik Sahlin, he in 2001, he kind of wrote a text about a recipe for creative climates. He's a professor in Lund, and he's a professor in philosophy, in science, and they have this he called this kind of a simple recipe of a creative climate with different aspects you have to, as a leader, as a research leader, because he has been using his own experiences from both Swedish and international research environments, and in his book he draws conclusions from when things were very creative and when research environments were not so creative. And he came up with these different aspects of it, and we'll go through them quickly now. And you can read more in his papers and his book also later if you want to read more. So the first one is generosity, that you should be all kind of embrace and be generous to people in the team. Say, yeah, we are in this together, we're doing this together, and we should we also have to be a sense of community, that you'll feel that we're doing this together. As a group. Of course, that people in the group should also be qualified. Of course, you shouldn't be there just because of. The merit should be on qualification. It's good to have a team with cultural diversity, not only ethnic, but also coming from different disciplines. Can also becomes more creative if you have people that come from other backgrounds than your own background. Trust and tolerance is important here, that you trust each other, and also that you also are tolerant to different opinions, and also that and people are humans and we make mistakes sometimes, and you shouldn't punish people for making mistakes. You should just be saying, what can we learn from these mistakes, rather than punish people. Equality, that we should doing. Again, being generous, but also being equal, saying that we treat each other as doing this together, and that no one should be disqualified and treated unequally in this group. Curiosity, that we are all that we feel that we can be open for exploring new things, not just doing things we've always done. but especially for creativity, it's important to be curious. Freedom of spirit, also that give room for people who want to have kind of individuals or that want to do things in their own way. Maybe they have little kind of special needs or something that they would like to do things differently. It might be that for the team sits in an open landscape, but there's one member who have problems with that and want to sit in an office of his or her own. And I think according to Nils-Erik Sahlin, then you should give that person the opportunity to sit on alone and not together, and then come into the group when appropriate, so to say, instead. So having rather high tolerance levels of people's different needs and wishes and so on. And finally, he also talks about small scale, not too big groups, not too big programs, but making them small, 8 to 10 people, 12 people, and so on. I think is something that Sahlin talks about is a good size of teams. So, okay, so that was the end of my presentation, and also I hope you also enjoyed the exercises. So, what conclusions can we draw from this? Well, my conclusion is that creativity is it's a force from nature to value and to care about, and that we should yes, we can take it for granted, but I think also at the same time we should also be be aware of how that we can also actually improve our creativity in different ways. So thank you very much for listening, and thank you.